I'd like to introduce Dr. Erin Shapiro, and she's going to guide us through the district capacity assessment.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Michael. And I believe you've now made me the presenter. Is that correct?
Yes, you should be able to take control of the presentation.
Okay. Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon. It's so nice to be able to see some familiar faces and pictures and names. So Ginny, of course, and Celeste, I had the chance to meet up in Eugene, Oregon at the University of Oregon, where I did my doctoral work and had the pleasure of working with Dr. Horner. And I just could not get away from Oregon. I actually left and went to Arizona for a period, but then came on back. And I'm actually a Southern California girl. So I'm from Mission Viejo down in Orange County, but I have family all over LA County and San Diego County. So so I definitely miss being down there with some of you guys in California, but I visit often, so I get my sunshine fix that way. Anyway, well, let's go ahead and get started. And the purpose of today is just to give you an introduction and an overview to the district capacity assessment. This is a measure that actually Dean Fixon's team over at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill started working on in collaboration with some of the work that we were doing here in Oregon. As a part of our EBIS program, Effective Behavioral and Intervention Support Systems, we, another state personnel development grant, we had developed a Fidelity tool to look at the integration of behavior and academic multi-tiered systems. And that measure was very specific to the language of PBIS and to the language of RTI for academics and literacy specifically. But as we started working with Dr. Dean Fixon and the team in North Carolina, it became clear that we really needed a tool that was a little more focused on the implementation of evidence-based practices generally, and not so specific towards PBIS and academic RTI. Let's see here. I'm going to see if I can change up my screen a little bit so I can. Okay, so Michael, if you do have any questions or would like me to stop at any point, just go ahead and speak up because I'm not able to see the dashboard for the webinar.
We will let you know.
Okay, thanks so much. So as I mentioned, we've been working with Rob and Dean and a whole host of folks around the country, the folks from MyBlissy, Steve Goodman, Kimberly St. Martin, Anna Harms. All of those folks have really come together to work on this tool called the District Capacity Assessment. And so I wanted to give thanks to those collaborations and colleagues that have helped really develop this measure, test this measure, and distribute this measure really across the country now. As Rob shared with Michael and I in an email this week, that there are over 100 people at this point in the country who are certified district capacity assessment administrators. So it's obviously catching on, and we're really thrilled to have it used across the country. There is a website, and I'll give you some of those web addresses as we go forward and talk about the tool, but largely the tool comes out of this third bullet here. SISIP is the acronym you might be familiar with. Add another one to your acronym toolbox there. State Implementation and Scaling Up of Evidence-Based Practices, and it's an OSEP-funded grant awarded to Dean Fixon, and Rob was one of the co-investigators on that as well. And they have a website, SISIP and .org, you can see there. And we've got another website that I can share with you as well. But right now, they are the ones that are hosting all of the information and all the training on the district capacity assessment. This is just a quick cover shot of the district capacity assessment. You can see that we are in version 6.2. So we've been working on it for quite some time. This version that I'm sharing with you is hot off the press, August 2015, you can see. And I know that there are some very minor changes that are going to be coming up here pretty soon. So there will be a version 6.2, but it won't change any of the mechanisms that I'll be sharing with you and any of the procedures that I'll be sharing with you today. So just for today, I'm going to give you an overview, define the purpose of the DCA, talk briefly about some of the administration procedures, and just kind of go over briefly some of the content that you'll see in that tool. I know most of you, because this is the California PBIS Coalition, most of you are interested with PBIS administration and implementation. And that is what we would call our chosen effective innovation, so EI. So you'll see that language in the district capacity assessment, because the thing to keep in mind is that although many of you are interested and focused on the implementation of PBIS, I know there's other practices that many of you are focused on implementing as well. So potentially this DCA could also serve the purpose of monitoring your implementation and your capacity to implement an evidence-based practice in addition to PBIS. So it doesn't have to be just PBIS alone. And so that might be of use to those of you that are dialing on or dialing in from the California School Psychology Association. Go school psychologists, glad to have you. But so this tool is not specific to PBIS, and so I do want to be clear about that. You know, it says right here, anticipate a 90-minute process, and that's certainly true as you're just getting started. Usually the measure at the very beginning does take about 2 hours to administer, but once you go through it that first time, then it really cuts down pretty quickly to about an hour in future administration. So today we have an hour and a half set aside for an introduction, but we'll see how long exactly we take here. So there are 4 primary purposes of the district capacity assessment. And here I have page 4 referenced because if you decide to go deeper in your learning of the district capacity assessment, if this is a tool that'll be helpful for you, or if you're at one of the 15 school climate transformation sites, then you'll definitely want to take the next step and learn more about the measure. You'll get a full manual, and the full manual is, I think, about 35 pages. And so on page 4, you can find this more information about the purpose of the DCA. But the primary purpose is, as I kind of already mentioned, it's to develop an indicator of the capacity to implement your ability, or your system's ability to implement the evidence-based practice of your whatever your choosing is. In our case, it's PBIS, so I'll kind of just use that as a shorthand as we go forward. And then once you have that baseline of information, an indicator of your capacity to implement PBIS, then you're really trying to figure out what are the next steps, what is our action plan so that we can continue our implementation and sustain our implementation over time. A couple of the secondary purposes of the measure are, of course, for progress monitoring. So this is not just a one-time measure. The measure is intended to be given multiple times, and sometimes even multiple times within a school year. And then since many of you are a part of the grant, so the School Climate Transformation Grant, it's really helpful to be able to, for your TA providers, for the coalition core members, to be able to look and see, okay, across all of our 15 sites, where are we at in our implementation of, say, hiring procedures to support the PBIS system? And in that way, your technical assistance providers and those that are offering you professional development and coaching can get more of a bird's eye view of the project, and can then provide the necessary technical assistance or professional development to the overall project and not just one LEA. So it's helpful for that reason as well. So as I pointed out to you, this is version 6.2. So in the previous versions, and Michael actually was one of the people who helped us try this out, we had 10 subscales and 40 items. So if you can imagine that right now we're at 2 hours, you're probably wondering how many items are actually on the measure. Well, the good news is that it has been revised, and it has we've brought it down to 26 core items. So it's a much shorter measure. And instead of 10 subscales, we now have 9 subscales. And those subscales are closely tied to what we refer to as the implementation drivers. On the right side of our slide here, you can see that I've got 2 images there. The one on the top refers to the implementation science frameworks, and that we have, that's something that you'll want to go a little bit more in depth and learn a little bit more about, but essentially we're referring to the implementation stages, the fact that anytime we're implementing a practice like PBIS, there's stages that we go through where we kind of just start out in the planning stage and then we're in the implementation, and throughout that whole process we're actually planning for sustainability as well. There's also information in the implementation science frameworks about the feedback cycles, or what they call the PDSA cycle, Plan, Do, Study, Act, and that's really that action planning component. And then really at the core of the implementation science frameworks are the implementation drivers, and that is the triangle down at the bottom. And yes, yet another triangle, right? You thought you knew all the triangles there were to know at this point, but no. There's one more, and we refer to it as the implementation driver triangle. You can see, and it might be a little bit small for you, but the 3 broad categories of the implementation drivers are listed right here: leadership, competency, and organization. And the idea is that the reason why they're called drivers is because they're actually driving the implementation of your chosen practice. So they're the drivers, and what is the fuel to move that system along so that your district, your LEA, is effectively implementing PBIS. And so it helps us to think about all the different variables that go into effective implementation. Under leadership, we have leadership, of course, but a lot of that is actually teaming, bringing a team together, planning how that team works well together, and if they give themselves the right time, the scheduled time to do the work to implement PBIS. The next implementation driver category is competency, and this is really looking at the people within your system. Do the people within your system have the training they need? Do they have the coaching they need? We hire new people within our system. Are we putting a job description out that actually says we want new applicants to have a foundation in PBIS? And then as far as a performance assessment goes, that's really looking at how are we assessing our training systems, our coaching systems, how are we assessing our maybe new teacher procedures, all of those pieces. So how do all those fit together? And then the final driver is organization, and that's really looking more at the data that we use to drive all of these systems. We have decision support data systems, which, like I said, is really the data that's helping to support the overall system decisions that you make to change the system. Facilitative administration and systems intervention are looking at how we use the data to support the implementation forward, but also how do we use the data to identify when we have problems, and then use that data for action planning. So these are the 3 overall implementation drivers: leadership, competency, and organization. And the district capacity assessment is structured to give you information about how your district is functioning within each of these areas, and then give you actionable items as a result of the implementation of the DCA. So the district capacity assessment, the administration, as I mentioned, can happen multiple times throughout the year. If you're just getting started, you might just do one time, especially now that we're already up and running in the school year. By the time you get around to actually administering the tool within your LEA, it might be, January. And so in that case, you might only do the DCA once, but that's your baseline information, and then you might re-administer it in the fall, for example. There are several roles of the participants involved in the DCA administration. The most important group to have gathered is the district implementation team. So for all of you working to implement PBIS, you've got an implementation team at the district level that's overseeing how PBIS is being carried throughout the district, from building to building, from classroom to classroom. So that team needs to be gathered together, and that team should be representative of the entire LEA. So you'll want to have district level people as well as building level teachers and administrators. Next is the DCA administrator, and that may very well end up being you, right? Because you're participating in the webinar, and we'll tell you exactly the steps for you to become a DCA administrator. But it could also be a core member of the California PBIS Coalition. So Michael mentioned some names, Rebecca and Barbara, Cami, so there might be a variety, and Michael himself, so there might be some other people that can come and help you with your DCA administration as well. So the DCA administrator is ideally someone who's not an everyday person within the building or within the district, but that doesn't have to be the case. If there's a district coach, then that person might be best suited to be the DCA administrator. The facilitator is that internal person, is the person that can help connect the dots. So some of you might be in the role of playing both the DCA administrator and the facilitator. And the facilitator is really there to bring the local knowledge and the local context to the DCA administrator. So for example, you might read a question and the folks on the team, on the district implementation team, aren't really sure what that means in their district. The facilitator would then help to say, well, remember when we put together our job descriptions, that would be an example of our selection process, and that would be, directly looking at this item. So that facilitator kind of helps to bridge the gap between some of the implementation science information and how that directly applies to your LEA's implementation of PBIS. The other people involved in the DCA administration include a note taker, so someone who's a part of the team, can be a part of the district implementation team, is there simply taking notes on why the team rated the district on a certain item. And then also the respondents, so that's all of the team together. And then observers are folks that you might, since some of you are part of a grant system, might be an outside observer who's just there to sit in, not vote, but maybe just observe the DCA process. So that's a good part. I like to share knowledge and build our state capacity for that just knowledge of the DCA administration. So as I mentioned, the DCA administrator is that trained individual, someone who's really going to lead the discussion, who's going to be asking all the questions, who's ideally external to the district implementation team, but doesn't have to be. 2 hours administration for the first time. Definitely give yourself the full 2 hours, especially if it's your first time administering the measure and it's the team's first time taking the measure. And if you do it for 2 hours, be sure to give your folks a break. So you don't want to keep them hostage for 2 hours. So it's nice to, read the room, take notice of how people are doing in the meeting, and just, give people breaks as needed. There are some suggested documentation for you to acquire before the meeting. So things like district improvement plans, organizational charts, internal policies. So since PBIS is new to some of you and some of you have been doing it a long time, you'll probably have already established procedures, maybe a policy manual for PBIS implementation in your district. So that would be a really great resource to have gathered before the meeting. If you're working with a district that has already administered the measure or has been administered the measure, then great, you're going to have those scores. And then there's actually a document that you'll discover if you go on to take the short course on the measure that lists out all of the suggested items that you might look to gather before the actual meeting. For some groups, this next bullet, define the practice under consideration, is a challenging one. But for this audience, it's actually pretty straightforward. PBIS is the practice, or the EI, the effective intervention or innovation. So that's the one that you'll be focused on. And it's really, that's why we kind of had some struggles initially when we were looking at academics and behavior within our K-12 systems in one measure. It was really hard to say, well, we've got PBIS going at the secondary level, but not the elementary level, or we've got RTI for academics going at the elementary, but not the secondary. So it's really hard to score one measure when you're talking about so many different effective innovations. And so it's really helpful to just identify PBIS in the elementary schools or PBIS in the secondary schools as your practice under consideration, because then you can more clearly answer the items. There is also a DCA Fidelity checklist That's right, you heard it, kind of a fidelity measure. So you'll want to be sure if you do become a DCA administrator, you'll want to be sure to print that out and have that available for you. And that's really where the DCA administrator and the facilitator can work together, because then you can go through afterwards and fill that out together and say, okay, where did we meet and where did we kind of need a little bit more assistance, or gosh, did we forget a step along the way? Also, before you go ahead and administer the DCA, you'll want to consider if you want to do that in the paper pencil version or in the online version. And so I'll show you an example of that. The measure itself can be found at this website, sysip.org, and I will, when I'm kind of through with the PowerPoint piece, I'll show you my screen here in a second, and I can share with you the actual websites and how to log in. Any questions, Michael, at this point? Are we doing okay?
I think we're fine. There are no questions yet.
Okay, great. We'll bring them on if you guys have questions. Let me know what you're thinking, and we welcome feedback.
Actually, Aaron, we just got a question in. We just got one question in.
Oh, perfect.
Says, do you want to read it, Karen?
Jenny Joseph is asking if MTSS is too big of an EI to use the district capacity assessment.
MTSS might be too big, I think, unless you're going to focus on, I would say, one feature particularly of that, maybe your universal systems or maybe your tier 2 systems. You could kind of chunk it out like that. Or, like I said, kind of choose the academic side or the behavior side. You know, it really depends on if you have, it helps if you have a manual. So if your system already has a manual that says this is, you know, TUSD's MTSS implementation manual, and then everything is really clearly defined, and so you might be able to do that. But it might also be a little bit challenging. So it is up to you and your discretion, certainly in your expert knowledge within the district, but it is helpful sometimes to break it up at least into elementary versus secondary.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So this is an example of the paper and pencil copy of the scoring form. You can see we've got our 26 items listed here. It's got the basics information for you to list at the top, and all of the items are scored 2, a 1, or a 0, 2 being fully in place, 1 being partially in place, and 0 being not in place at all. Let's see, and then I'll show you this is the online version, so if you do choose to go the sysip.org route, it actually, once you log in, it looks very similar if you've been on the PBIS assessment apps page website. This is a very similar procedure for doing the TFI, for example, the tiered fidelity inventory. It'll look very similar to you. And so it has each of the items, again, the 0, the 1, or the 2. It saves it as you're taking the survey. So if you forget or you get disrupted and during the meeting, then it will save it as you're progressing. And then at the end, you submit, and then it tallies everything for you. I will say, if you decide to take the paper pencil version because you don't have adequate internet access, then I would recommend still just taking your answers from the paper pencil and entering it into the website when you do have internet connectivity, so that you can then get the reports and the scoring procedures, or the scoring reports. As far as the scoring procedures go, as I mentioned, it's a 0 to 2 scale, so very similar if you have administered the tiered fidelity inventory. And we also have, it's very similar to the TFI in that we have a simultaneous public voting process. And so here we basically, whoever is the DCA administrator will read the full item, either read out loud the scoring rubric, and I'll show you an example of this in a second, or just ask participants to read those on their own, and then ask everyone to vote. Ready, set, vote. And you can do this with hands. We've done it with 2 fingers and then 1 finger, or fist close for not in place. You can also do it with pieces of paper, also a thumbs up for fully in place, to the side for partially in place, or a thumbs down for not in place at all. So whatever method is most convenient for your group. Here's just a quick screenshot of the DCA Administration Fidelity tool. Just a quick process where you circle yes or no if we followed all those steps as we were administering the DCA. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's also a helpful tool as you're preparing to administer the DCA. It really takes you through the full process, where you start by inviting the team together, making sure everyone knows the time, the place, how long you're going to be there, etc. Making sure you have your materials prepared in advance. We do recommend that although you're going to have a screen and have that displayed within the conference room, you would also have paper copies available for everyone so that people can be reading it through, and then before they vote, maybe they're circling on their own page what they voted, and then kind of filling in some notes. So it's a very interactive process. This way everyone's engaged. And so it's best for everyone to have a paper pencil copy in front of them, in addition to the measure being being displayed up on a screen. There's an overview, the actual administration occurs, and then there's some information here about the actual administration. And then the idea is that as you're going through this, you would basically follow steps 5 through 8 repeatedly, where you ask the question, you get people to vote, you tally the votes, and then you see if consensus has, if the group has come to consensus on an item, and then you record that. So sometimes there might be a little bit of back and forth when you do first administer the measure, where you ask a question, you go over the item, you ask everyone to vote, and say you have a group of 5 people and the majority said 2 fully in place and 2 people said 1 partially in place. Then the DCA administrator would go ahead and ask those people who voted a 1, why are you saying 1? What is it about this item that makes you think, or your implementation that makes you think it's not fully in place? The minority then has a chance to say what they're thinking, and then a small discussion, then ensues, so that the majority voters, the 2, actually say, oh gosh, you're right, we don't have that. I was being a little bit too optimistic there. Or someone who voted a 2 said, no, we do have that. See, it's right here. And the 1 can say, oh, yeah, you're right. And so then in order to gain consensus, we then ask, okay, so those of you who voted 1, let's vote again. Everyone vote. And then again, the majority, can you live with the 2 if there's still a couple holdouts on the 1? And if they say yes, great, then you just move along. So it doesn't mean that everyone has to vote a 2 at the same time, but they have to be able to live with the fact that the score 2 is being recorded, and that there was some discussion there along the way. And then there's just kind of more information at the end here about the action planning process, and how to wrap up for the team. So just making sure that all the steps are followed. Now, when you do finish the actual administration and you get your reports, one thing that you'll notice is that the items on the measure are not exactly in the order of the different subscales. So here I have a brief table, and it's also in the overall manual, the 35-page manual that you'll get. And here we have them grouped by the implementation drivers. So leadership being the first driver, we've got 2 sections for that. Leadership and planning, and you can see that items number 1, 2, 3, 7, and 17 are a part of the leadership item. 8, 9, and 18 are representative of planning. For example, down in organization, decision support data systems has items 14, 15, and 19, whereas systems intervention really only has item number 12. So it's all of these items together represent the construct of organization. All of these items together represent the construct of competency as an implementation driver. So that's something to think about just as you're going down the list, that it's not all the leadership items all grouped together on the measure. So here's an example of the scoring guide. And this is where you'll definitely want to have a printed out copy of this for all of the participants so that they can be reading along. This will also be displayed on the screen, but everyone has different visibility levels, so it's nice to have that right there in front of you. And the role of the DCA administrator would be to actually read aloud the items and then ask everyone to vote. So for example, here we've got our first item that says, there is a district implementation team to support implementation of effective innovation. So in our case, PBIS. So, as you're administering it, you could just take out EI and add in PBIS. So is there a district implementation team to support the implementation of PBIS? You get 2 points if your team is developed and it is representative of the district or whatever your system is, and it is of a functional size. And when you go through the actual short course, they'll talk to you about functional size and what's the best size of group to actually be able to manage the implementation of PBIS or of any EI. Now, a system would be rated 1 if a team is developed and it's representative of the district, but the team size is not quite functional, so it's too large or it's maybe too small, and the work isn't able to be effectively accomplished. So 0 points would be awarded if there is not a team at all, there's not a formal team, or the team composition is not representative of the district. So say you have an implementation team, but there's only district level administrators on that team, then that would be a 0 until you invite a few more people who are representative of the K-12 system. And so, what would be the data source there? A list of the team members, who they are, their job titles, etc. So then you would go ahead and ask your team to vote. Give everyone a second, say ready, set, vote. So everyone's voting at the same time. And that really helps with any power dynamics because we will have a teacher possibly sitting next to their principal, or a principal maybe sitting next to their curriculum director at the district level. And, to avoid some of those interpersonal politics and roles across the district, it's helpful to get everyone to vote at the same time and know, too, that we're working towards consensus in a way that, there may be some disagreement, but we're coming to an agreement about an answer that everyone can live with. So as the team votes, you say, are we ready? Everyone ready to vote? Okay, great. And then we document the score. So the DCA administrator is looking around the room, tallying up how many 2s, how many 1s, how many 0s, and then either prompting for more information or just recording the score. So again, remembering that consensus means that voters in the minority can live with and support the majority decision on an individual item. Okay, so as a result of the district capacity assessment, you get really 4 primary products. First, of course, is a total score. Then we have a subscale score on the different implementation drivers. You can, of course, see the item scores. And then the ultimate goal is to actually get an action plan together, one that the district implementation team can monitor over time and that the DCA can help you show growth of your implementation and your capacity to implement over time. Here's an example of the overall total score. When you enter in the data into the sysipdog.org site, you'll get a series of reports. And so this is the first report that you can get. This is one school district score where it shows you the date that it was administered, and then it shows you the overall score. So right now, let's say for PBIS, this school district has an implementation score of, maybe 55%. But, if that doesn't tell you too much, 55%, what are we good at? What do we need to work on? And so that's when you really need to look at the subscale information. And I'll show you the most accurate information that we have, or the most accurate reports that we currently have. So this is a little bit of a slightly older version, but it gives you the idea that you can see the subscales are down at the bottom. So say action planning, selection, administration, systems interventions, those are ones that might need support, but we can give ourselves a pat on the back for performance assessment. Wow, look at us. We're just starting this process and we got 100% on performance assessment. We're actually doing pretty well when it comes to systems alignment, training and coaching, and decision support data systems. Okay, so we've got some great things to build off of, some good successes already in our pocket. So now where are some places where we can make the smallest amount of change and get that biggest impact? So that's an example of the two major reports that you'll get. As you administer the measure over time, then you start to get multiple data points so that you can compare the growth over time. So again, here's another district where we have similar, our first baseline data was around 55% of implementation, but then at our second administration in the spring, we actually got something closer to 78% being implemented. So we saw great growth there, very exciting, but where was that growth precisely? And so that's when we would look down at the subscale scores. And as the DCA administrator and facilitator, you could talk about the strengths first. Obviously, we always like to start with the positives, looking at the great amount of growth in systems alignment, performance assessment, training, coaching. Wow, and then looking at what did we do to really get that change. And then eventually talking about, okay, there's a clear area that we need to address here. So although we're not quite at 80% on all of these measures, we really do need to talk about selection. Now that we've got training in place, now that we've got our coaching moving quite along, now we really need to talk about how are we hiring people. Now that once we get people in the door, we're training and coaching them, but how do we make sure that the people that we're bringing into our buildings have the baseline knowledge that we really want them to have? So this is where your discussions are based off of for that action planning process. But then really when it gets down to it, if you're looking at a specific area of, say, selection, you want to know what did we score, how did we score on a precise item, and so how can that lead us to a precise action plan? This is what the report, section of the report will look like for the items. This is just the leadership section that I pulled out so you could see that. But you can see that it groups the items that are relating to leadership and to planning together. It gives you the section total, 8 out of 10, 5 out of 6. And then you can see, okay, here number 7, funds are available to support the implementation of PBIS. Well, we don't really have that fully documented yet. We've kind of pulling funds here and there, and so maybe we want to take a look at that. Or building implementation teams are developed and functioning to support the implementation of PBIS. And again, that might be a case of, well, we don't really have building implementation teams in all of our buildings, or have them in some of our buildings, or they're there, but they're not really doing anything yet. So, so again, the item level data is also necessary when you're moving towards your action planning process. And again, this is a sample report from the sysip.org website. This is the most recent version, as I mentioned, the most recent version, so DCA version 6, a subscale report. And so you can see we've gotten a little bit more in detail here where we actually group out the bar graph by the implementation driver, leadership, competency, or organization. We also have the subsections listed there, so you can see precisely the subsections. And this is an example where we only have one administration time. We don't have 2 different years or points to look at. But then along the bottom, it gives you the date the measure was administered, as well as the actual score of implementation for each of the sections. Also, along with the measure, you will receive an action planning form. And this is the action planning form kind of chunked out into pieces. But basically, you've got each of the areas, and the expectation is not that you find and fill in an action item for every single one of these areas. But the expectation is that you would choose an area, maybe 2 areas, that really can be targeted and developed within the next 3 months. So you can see there's some clear steps that are offered here. For any item listed below, a 2, consider actions that can be completed within the next 3 months, and define the action, definitely the who's doing it, when is it going to happen, how is it going to happen, who are the support people, all of that information. And then finally, really having the team prioritize which ones are the most critical so that they're the most likely to actually occur. Because if we get overwhelmed with the action planning process, then it all kind of crumbles apart or nothing gets done very well. So really prioritizing those key actions that can happen within a very short period of time and really help to make a difference too. There is also an action planning, some recommendations for that process. And so this is not necessarily a requirement that you fill out this form every single time, but it's just to help you as you're guiding the process. So, setting a time and a date. And I would say that this is really more for the facilitator than it is for the DCA administrator. If the DCA administrator is in fact someone from outside your LEA or your school system, then this is more applicable to the implementation team themselves so that they're following up. And for all you school psychs in the audience, you're probably wondering, what is the technical adequacy on this information? I know that's the question that I always ask. And so we do have some promising information. Content validity has been completed. Usability analysis has been completed. They're working on the test-retest reliability. And this is from Rob, and he says it's been so far very good, but I don't have the specific numbers on that. And the predictive validity, we're working on that plan right now. I know I'm looking into how we can study that more precisely. So, and the item review has also been conducted, and those are some of the minor changes that are going to be taking place in the version 6.3. So that will be coming up right around the corner here. And as I mentioned, we've got over about 100 people that have actually gone through the process to become a DCA administrator, and I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. And so we've got schools and districts all over the country that have been participating in this process. Here in Oregon, we have two, of course, there's Rob and myself, but then there's two people within the state who the state is actually contracting through one of our state personnel development grants to go and do the DCA and administer the DCA to a number of the school districts within our state personnel development grant, EBIS. So we're collecting that data here in Oregon as well. What I'd like to do is go ahead and share my screen and show you guys some of the websites that I was mentioning. Any more questions, Michael, as we get set up here?
We were just checking the screen and there haven't been any more questions yet. So if you're in the audience, please feel free to put the questions in. Okay,
great. Thank you. So this first website I wanted to show you is the CISIP website. And you actually get to this one by typing scaleup.org. So it's a pretty easy website name to remember, scalingeup.org. But then when you actually click on it, it takes you to a much longer, not very easy to remember website title. So scalingeup.org is what you want to play. And I see Carrie added that to our chat room, so thank you for doing that. And this is Dean Fixon and Karen Blaze. And they have really been at the forefront of bringing implementation science to education. They've also worked in social sciences and business and the medical sciences, and so in bringing implementation science to those fields as well. But their work, along with Rob and George Sagai, have really been leaders in bringing implementation science to education. So you can see right here on their main landing page is information about the district capacity assessment. And let's see here. So DCA, you can read more and enroll. So that's one thing you can do, one way you can access more information on the district capacity assessment. Another way you can do that is one of their websites that they call the AI Hub. And I just went ahead and typed in AI Hub into Google just to show you. And it comes right up. It's the very first one. When you click on the AI Hub, which stands for Active Implementation, it takes you to their website where they have more than just information on the DCA. So there's a number of pieces about implementation science. So as I've been talking about implementation science, if that's new to you or you'd like to learn more about that, this is the great place to start. One of my favorite places to send people is to the Quick Start on implementation science. It's a 5-minute presentation overview. They did a really, really nice job with setting up this learning management system. And so if you want to know more about implementation science and you want just some of those foundational pieces, get the lingo down when we're talking about the implementation frameworks, start here at this implementation quick start. It's only 5 minutes and 10 seconds, so it's a good investment of time. But if you want to know more about the DCA and actually take the course on the DCA, then you're actually going to click on modules and lessons. And I will say that I also have this in the PowerPoint presentation, so I'm just kind of showing you the process here. And again, you can see here, scroll up a little bit. You can see here that they have a number of modules available for you. They also have lessons. The modules are not modules are often self-guided, so you're actually reading and clicking through the content. The lessons, however, are more of a video, so they've got times here for how long each one of those takes to watch if you watch it straight through. And then they also have kind of some associated resources that go along with that. But again, this is that quick start video I told you about, the 5 minutes long. They've got, gosh, just a number of great ones. I love the stages of implementation is very helpful as you all are beginning or maybe a few years into your implementation of PBIS. This is a nice piece for people to be aware of, because a lot of times we jump into implementation without actually thinking of all the pieces, and then once we're there, we're like, oh yeah, we forgot to budget for that, we forgot to do this, we forgot to change our job descriptions. So the stages of implementation analysis is a helpful process to also guide your action planning. But in relation to our main topic today, the district capacity assessment, this is where you'll want to go right here. The district capacity assessment, it's a short course, so good news, right? Because all of you are so busy. This course really only takes you about an hour. And I can vouch for this. I've taken the course too, and I know quite a few other people there in California have as well. And so it only takes about an hour to go through. It's pretty straightforward. It's also very easy to enroll. So I just clicked on Review and Enroll. And gives you a brief description. What I do want to point out to you here, it's a handy tool, handout number 22, an overview of the DCA. And I actually have a closer shot of that, so you can see that a little bit better. As you prepare to administer the DCA, I find that it's helpful to maybe send this one-pager out to the teams that I'll be working with when it's their very first time. It gives you just some very basic, frequently asked questions. What is it? What's the purpose of it? How is it administered? How much time? And what are the outcomes? So very straightforward, handy tool right there. And you get access to all of this when you just come over to the website. But then to actually enroll in the course to become a certified DCA administrator, then you do need to click here to go to the course site. You can see here it says enrollment key. When you sign up, you'll need that information, and it'll be right there on the screen when you go to log in. It's actually a Moodle. And let's see here. It says I'm already logged in. Let me go to my home. There we go. So my course was the DC Administration training, and so you'll see this when you log in. You'll get the chance to enter in that administration key so that you can sign up for the course. And then you just go through the training. It's pretty self-explanatory. You've got the content here. You kind of guide yourself through the process, and then when you've completed it, it actually checks it off to show that you've completed that section of the course. Let's see here. Let me go back. When you have completed the course, you will get an email, and it'll send you an email saying that you've officially completed the course, you're a certified DC administrator, and, as all apps, good performance feedback apps have these days, you earn a badge. It's like our modern day adult stickers or our gold stars. We now get a badge with all of our apps, it seems like. So you get a badge, but if in case anyone asks, you have this officially completed. If you are a part of the 15 school climate transformation grantees, this would be great to then forward to one of the core coalition folks that you're working with to share, yep, I completed this, now let's work together on moving forward with how can we use the tool, and can you look at our data to help us do this action planning process. So those are all the websites I wanted to show you. Let me check to make sure I got them all. Oh, one more. More importantly, once you've confirmed and completed the DCA short course at the AI Hub, I know, lots of acronyms and new terms, I'm sorry. Once you've completed the course and you've received your badge, then you will gain access to the SysEP site. And this website, sysep.org, this is where the actual measure is administered. And this is where you log in. So you only get access to this site once you've completed the DCA administration. And you'll want to email Karen Ward, whose information is at that AI Hub site, so you can get her email address there. And then it would be ideal if you could also carbon copy Michael or whoever your core coalition member is, so that you can be sure that they are fully supporting you in that process. So we don't want anyone to feel like they're out on their own trying to figure this stuff out. This is the website where you'll actually administer the DCA if you're doing the online version. I'm going to click here on the district capacity assessment. For those of you at this, oh, yes, Michael.
Sorry, Erin. It looks like your screen is stuck.
Oh.
A couple slides back. So I just wanted to let you know they're not seeing your screen right now.
Oh, I wonder what I can do. Can you see the, what are you seeing right now?
It's stuck on a white screen from the AI Hub.
Oh, darn it. Let me try to close out a few things. And maybe what I could do is stop sharing and then share again.
Yeah, restart it.
I'll do that real quick. Oh, and now all your pictures are much bigger too. Okay, let me try to share this one more time.
Okay, we can see you again.
Oh, good. Well, let's change that and get that. And, okay, are you seeing the sysep.org website?
It is loading. I think we might have a slow connection. That seems to be the problem. It's loading.
Maybe in the chat someone can tell me if you're seeing the sysep.org site.
It's about halfway there.
Wow.
Okay, we're on it now.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sorry that happened, but so this is just an example of the district capacity assessment where you would actually set it up. If you want to add an organization, you will actually have an organization that you're working with directly. So in my case, I'm going to just find a fake district here. Well, this is a real district, but they've never been administered this measure. So Vernonia School District, that is a real place with a real name here in Oregon, their darling location. And then when you click on your district, you simply go ahead and open a survey by selecting the DCA. And are you seeing all of these steps, Michael?
It is coming up now.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll try to move a little bit slower maybe so my words are actually going along with the with the images. So at the open survey, you select DCA version 6 and click open survey. Here under add user is those of you that are going to become the DCA administrator from your district. You'll be able to add the other people on your team by clicking on add user. So you can give people different access to the information. So someone like Margaret and Barbara and Rebecca, those guys can be administrators for you so that they can go in and see if you're having any issues along the way. And then, but you can also add team members who you want to allow to access the reports, but maybe not change any of the information. So you can give team members read-only access at any time as well. I'm not going to add any users, but I will go ahead and click on Take Survey. When you've completed the survey, you would click on View Reports. If you, it does take a minute to load, and then it basically gives you an option to set the date for when you are going to administer the DCA. So I'm selecting today and clicking on to the next piece here. You fill in the names of your team members, administrators. Our effective innovation is PBIS. And then the actual survey, the DCA survey, opens for you in that screen. And then you simply go through and use the radio buttons here to click whatever your answers are. Once you've completed that, you go all the way to the bottom. A few more here. See if it'll let me do it with only partial answers, and I'm going to submit. All of the items are on one page. That's something important to remember, that really you want to be sure to ideally complete them all and then click the submit button. And it does take a little bit of time to process it once it goes through. And I will say that the report, once you do complete your survey, the report is not available immediately. It does take a little bit. So if you complete the survey in the morning, it'll be ready by the afternoon usually. But most of the time when we've been administering these, it's often taking place in the afternoon. And so in that case, it's usually not ready until the next day. So that's something to consider. And I know some of you in California have experience administering the DCA as well. And I don't know, Michael, if that's been your experience, or Barbara was mentioning that she just finished one as well.
It's really ranged. I've had it within 20 minutes on occasion, and then it's been the next day. So
okay.
It kind of depends, and I think the afternoon is the key. Sometimes it falls over to the next day.
Exactly. Yeah, that's been my experience too. So then, let's see here. Once you've clicked submit, it does want me to go through and answer everything. So that is something good to know. You cannot skip any of the answers if you're filling it in, or any of the items if you're filling it in here. If I go back to maybe my organizations, and it'll take me back to the list of all of the districts that I have created, made up data for. Well, and actually I have access to all of Oregon, but you click on your district, and then you can click on reports. You can also just go to survey reports up here, and then you'll be prompted to then define.
That's all in California.
Excuse me. You'll be prompted to define which report, and you can see that we've got the DCA here. We also have the Otis. That's a new observation tool that I'm also a co-author of, along with Dean Fixon and some members of their team over there. And then the state capacity assessment. You set up the actual dates for when your window of opportunity, when your window for testing was. So if you have multiple times when you've administered the survey over the course of multiple years, then you'll want to be sure to select all of those academic years, select the organization, and click generate, and that's how you get the reports that I was sharing with you. Let's see here, I need to go back to dashboard. So again, if any of you guys have been in the PBIS assessments website, it's very similar to that setup. Along the side here, you actually have the District Capacity Assessment Overview 6.0. The one at the bottom is the most recent one. Actually, when I was in here exploring, I was like, oh, I need to ask them to switch that. So wherever it says 6.0, that's the most recent one that's posted here, we will get the 6.2 or 6.3 added within the next week or so, so that's here as well. But when you go on to the AI Hub, you'll get access to the most recent version of the DCA as well. So I do want to then just briefly talk about the piece for, okay, you heard all these different pieces, where do you go next? The first thing, if you do want to be a DCA administrator for your LEA or your system, then the next thing to do is to take the short course at the Active Implementation Hub. The website is there. And as I showed you, you'll click on modules and lessons, and then under the AI short course, click on the DCA. After you sign up for that, or around the same time, you'll email Karen Ward, and her email is right there on the website when you're signing up for the AI Hub for the short course. You'll email Karen and Michael with your request to become a DCA administrator for your LEA, and you'll send her that information. As we were talking before the webinar got started, Barbara was asking me this very question. In case any of you are working with charter schools or private schools that maybe you don't see in the system, it's helpful to identify their NCIS number, and so that'll be helpful for us to get them into the sysip.org site for the actual assessment, so that when you search for an organization, we'll be able to find it. And then this 1C I put in here as an option, and I promise I asked Michael before I put this in here, but it's optional, but I think it's a really good idea to go ahead and email Michael or any of your other core members of the coalition, Rebecca, Barbara, I think Cammie Murphy was the name you mentioned too, Michael. Email them, because they can also help you with your first DCA administration. They can co-facilitate with you, or at the very least, they can dial in remotely and be there as you're administering it, so that you can ask them any questions as you're going through. And also they can help you with the action planning process. So since you guys have them as a resource within your state, I would say, and they're volunteering, I would say be sure to give them a call. They're there and available for you to facilitate that process.
Yes, we would be happy to help, and sometimes it's a little easier if you have an outside facilitator for the first time. So all of the people that Erin mentioned, I'm sure would be able to support you in that.
Great. Yeah, and I think, and that's the way we've been doing it here in Oregon, certainly. It's been very helpful for, say, myself to go with a district level coach, and that person will play the role of the facilitator the first time through. And then I'll be the administrator asking the questions, monitoring the implementation, recording the score with someone on the team as a note taker. And then in the school districts that I've been working with, I've been able to now transition. So I'm their note taker. They are the administrator and the facilitator. And so in that way, we've been able to build the capacity within the district for them to use this as a tool and self-monitor their own implementation. And I just kind of come along, like I said, as a note taker. If anything comes up, I'm able to help. But honestly, they're doing, after I think 2 administrations, they're off and running on their own and really don't even need me. I'm just nosy and want to sit in the meetings, basically. So that's something to think about.
We did get a question, Erin, from Barbara Kelly. She asked if we have schools who took the 6.0 version or even an earlier version, and then they take the 6.2. Will those graphs combine together? How will that work?
It's a great question, Barbara. The graphs will not combine together. So, and I've experienced this with the TFI recently, actually, because they updated the versions of the TFI as well. So basically what we do, and I'm going to try to exit my PowerPoint, and let's see if I kept that open. When you go to reports, what you'll need to do is ask for, I kind of wish I was in the TF, let's see here. You'll have the district that you're mentioning, they will have both a DCA and a DCA version 6. And so you'll need to go ahead and click on the DCA, select the report that you want, and then go ahead and, select the organization and the year. And then that report will come up right here in the middle of your screen with a tab. And then you'll have to go back to the left of your screen, click DCA version 6 to get the most recent version. Again, select the dates, click generate again, and that will come up in a second tab. And so what I've done from there is simply copy the actual graph. So copy and paste the image. I've got a Mac, so I would right click and then copy the image, save it as a JPEG or a TIFF, and then go ahead and just paste that into a PowerPoint presentation to share back with them. That's how I've been doing it, but you can also export it as PDF and then give those to them. So fortunately, the two different versions we're not able to place on a side-by-side bar chart. Thanks for the question. I know I wish we could, but the items and the subsections are different, so that's why we can't do that.
I believe that was our only question. Okay.
Great.
So there are no more questions.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, of course. Thank you, Barbara, for that great question. I only had one last thing, and that was to say thank you. So just thank you for the chance to participate, and I'm so excited to hear about all the work that you all are doing in California. It's really offering a lot of inspiration for the rest of the country to think that such a large state can just be doing such great things in a short amount of time. So thanks for setting a great example. I've got my email address up here. As Michael said, I'm happy to answer questions. Rob is also available to answer questions about the DCA in particular. I've got those websites up there, and I'm trying out this Twitter thing. So if any of you guys are on Twitter, let me know, and I'll follow you if you follow me. So.
Well, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the rest of the coalition. We really appreciate you taking the time out today to help California understand the value of the DCA and how it can support implementation across the state and help really support the 15 school climate transformation sites with their work on the grant requirements too. So.
Great. Yeah, that'll be something that I know that the feds are definitely interested in receiving this level of information, because then it really shows them the power of the funds that they're giving everyone, that they can actually see change. And that one graph that I did show, it is an example that we have been seeing change in districts within even the course of a single year. So it's really nice to be able to see our adults' behavior change and our systems change, and then how that reflects in the outcomes with the students. So it's pretty exciting.
Yes, so with that, I'm going to close today's session and remind everybody, look for our newsletter. It's coming out. We're very excited. Luke Anderson helped put that together, so a big thank you out to Luke. And the Desert Mountain SELPA again for highlighting one of their demonstration programs down in Southern California. And we look forward to talking to some of you about highlighting your programs as you get going with your PBIS implementation or support in whatever stage you're in. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.